Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss what is looking like a full-on "may I lick your boots" President Putin surrender from Donald Trump, despite being in a strong position. And people around Europe, leaders as well as commentators, have been quick to attack Trump's cowardice, but President Macron of France was one of the few to actually tell it like it is. This is our fault, Europe's fault collectively, and blaming others is not only dishonest, but it's not actually going to solve anything. But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So Trump is now talking about doing everything Putin wants to do. In fact, Putin's so surprised he's thinking of adding a few more demands into the mix as well. You know, bizarre that we're going to have surrender talks, and the one that is in the weak position, Russia, is going to be the one dictating the terms. That must be a historical first. And strategically, it's dumb. It's dumb on multiple levels. First, Trump is in an insanely strong position to leverage a lot of power for America here, which will produce huge returns on their military and economic investment. Putin was believed to be mere months away from near economic collapse. His war economy is struggling badly. It's not even clear he can afford the peace, unless, of course, he's able to take his prize in Ukraine, its rich resources, which you would think Trump would want for America. You know, Trump could have gone further than Biden. He could have completely unleashed Ukraine if he wanted the war to end quickly. Nobody seriously believes in the threat of Russian escalation anymore. America would then have put an ideological enemy in its box and would have the gratitude of some of the richest countries in the world. Instead, he has enabled America's enemies, weakened its allies. I don't know what emerges in the next generation after this, but it will definitely be a weaker America. If Russia invades further European countries and rebuilds the Soviet Union, obviously America is weakened by that because it loses more allies. But if Europe does finally pull up its big boy pants and decides to sort itself out, it will push back on largely its own efforts. At the end of it, it will have realised that America is a trading partner but not an ally. But that works both ways. It means European countries will no longer be so deferential to America when it comes to geopolitical decisions. America may think it's silly to be spending so much on the defence of Europe when Europe is a rich continent which shares many of its political and moral values anyway, but the sum is very small for the United States and means that they get to be the leader of the Western world. Trump thinks he can withdraw the resources and still remain in that leadership role. It's like, no, he can't. That being said, just because it's in America's interest to be the protector of the West doesn't mean it should have to play that role if it doesn't want to. And it's clear it doesn't want to. As Europe has reeled from Trump's behaviour towards Ukraine and Russia, President Macron has been urging us to take the red pill here. America's loss of interest in Europe isn't just about Trump. Macron noted that Biden wasn't exactly committed. I mean, yeah, he made sure Ukraine were backed to at least not lose. But even his administration was wanting to reduce military resources in Europe. You know, think back to just before 2022. Biden was talking about withdrawing more resources to the Pacific. That's where America thinks it needs to focus. Frankly, the US only wants as many troops in Europe as are needed to deploy to the Middle East. That's where their interest lies, not Europe. Europe's just a handy location for their garrisons to get to the Middle East when shit kicks off there. And while most European leaders are flapping about, at least Macron is saying that nothing Trump has done should surprise them, that this has been the direction of travel for some time, and that it was Europe, you know, it's Europe who should rise to this and defend ourselves, not look for blame. And in this, he's not entirely alone. Starmer's been saying much the same thing, but in much more muted form. Tusk, who is very much at the sharp end of this, has been using his country's time as with the EU presidency to work on a practical plan to massively boost military capabilities in Europe to replace the disappearing Americans. The problem, of course, is the cost. This is an existential emergency. Like, if Europe could allow itself to think rationally, we would decide that, yeah, we should absolutely double our defence budgets overnight, boost factories and research facilities in Europe, meaning America would also lose out on the sales of military hardware, and become self-reliant in defence of our own bloody continent. But we don't collectively think this rationally. The problem is that although America has managed to extract rich financial returns from its defence budget and its defence priorities, something they don't seem to realise right now, for Europe, it would just be a cost to stand still. If Europe isn't defended, then yeah, in a generation's time, people will look back and ask why we were penny pinching when the results were much more costly. But the answer will be that if Europe gets this right, they will have to spend a lot more money to do what? To just stop a terrible future? But you've stopped it. People don't realise you've done it. Because that's what defence spending is. It's a cost where if you get it right, the public never see the benefit. Because it's an expense to avert disaster. Well, if you avert disaster, nobody knows you did it. But they'll know that you are spending less on public services to pay for it all. And that's the problem. Governments who spend money on better transport, healthcare, education, energy and so on will be rewarded at the ballot box if they can deliver the benefits quickly enough. Spend money on defence, how many voters are really impressed with that? Not enough to win an election, because the ideal defence force is one that is so strong it never needs to see action on the battlefield. So people will think we don't need it. After all, they don't see it in use. And they won't understand why we're spending so much money on it. And it would be different if all political parties in a country had that national interest in mind, because no one will make an issue of it. But all you need is one major political party who have no scruples and will say, oh, why are you spending so much money on that? We'd totally cut those costs. And that's it. And this is the problem that people like Macron have to grapple with. He's right in saying there's no point blaming Trump, because America has more generally been wanting to move in this direction. He's just doing it more quickly and recklessly than others would. He's also right to say that Europe needs to stand up for itself now and should have done so a long time ago. But it needs more than a handful of European leaders to say it. It needs most of them to do it. Obviously, some will never do so. The likes of Orban are comfortable with Putin's designs. He might change his mind once Russia turns its attention to Hungary, but it'll be too late by then. But he is in a minority anyway. Most Eastern European leaders definitely correctly see the threat Putin poses. And there are only so many Putin fans leading the rest of Europe. Like even Italy's Meloni seems to be giving the impression she's pragmatically reevaluating a few things in that direction. But how to solve the problem of boosting defence spending without asking heads of government to basically sacrifice the next election, because they're not going to do that. Even in the UK, Starmer seems seized to the problem, yet can't say when he's even going to get defence spending up to 2.5% of GDP. And 2.5% is less than it was under the last Labour government, and nowhere near enough now. Europe needs an extra 100,000 troops if it's going to replace American troops. That is on top of the forces we already have. We also need to develop advanced air and missile defence systems if we're going to have to avoid paying full whack for the American ones if they no longer contribute them themselves. I mean, let's face it, NATO's days could be numbered here. I've said before, it might be vaguely hilarious if all the Trump fanboys in Britain have to face up to the fact that because of Trump, we actually end up with that EU army they keep crying about. But their naughty messiah has basically said that this should happen. After all, who cares whether Trump would block Ukraine's membership of NATO if NATO isn't going to defend Europe anyway? You know, we need a force which will, and if we form it, Trump won't be dictating who joins it. In terms of costs, think about this. It would have cost nothing to have kicked Russia out of Crimea when they first stuck their toes in the water in 2014. Absolutely cost nothing. We didn't do it. We left them. Preventing them launching their full-scale invasion. They amassed on the border of Ukraine. If we'd have actually just sent troops in there and said, yeah, you ain't crossing this line, mate, in 2022, that would have been more expensive than just stopping them getting to Crimea in the first place. But we didn't do that either. So now we're spending more money just propping Ukraine up than it would have cost to stop Russia invading in either the first or the second place. So how much more will it cost us in 10 years' time when Russia is waging a full-scale invasion of Eastern Europe? But if we're going to learn anything from this, because we're now spending a fortune, never mind America's contribution, Europe is now spending a fortune where we wouldn't have had to if we nipped it in the bud. And the lesson I'm learning here is that a country or a collection of countries will quite happily spend 100 times as much on defence when it's being invaded than 1% of that sum to stop the invasion in the first place. Because once you're invaded, the public know that you need to spend that money, but they don't know you need it when you're just back in prevention. And it's a mad system. You know, I mean, what's going to happen in the future if Russia is waging a full-scale invasion of Eastern Europe. Like, leaders have to stop wasting time whining about Trump. They need to work out a way of defending themselves in a way that doesn't cost them the next election. Because Trump is giving Putin everything he wants. That's the reality. And the second reality is that it may be impossible to persuade Trump not to do that. I mean, try it anyway, it might work. But make sure we're also working on a plan that accepts Trump is a Putin puppet still. I mean, there's lots of things to blame Trump for. There's lots of really stupid, self-defeating things he's doing. But blaming him for Europe's lack of foresight is not really one of them. We need to take some responsibility for ourselves. After all, how many of us really want to be reliant on America if they're going to keep electing people like Trump anyway? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.